Okay, welcome everyone to ICLEI's fourth webinar on urban agriculture and food security. My name is Emily Dowding-Smith from ICLEI's Resilient Cities team here in Bonn, Germany, and I'll be hosting this webinar for you today. This week's webinar coincides with World Food Day, which was earlier in the week, and also delves into an important topic for cities to address, putting food and nutritional security back on the table. Next year at Resilient Cities' fourth Global Forum on Urban Resilience and Adaptation here in Bonn, we will have a specific session on this topic. If you are interested in contributing to that forum, and the conference in general, I would like to take this opportunity to let you know that our call for contributions is currently open, and it will be until the 30th of November. You may wish to submit on the topic of urban agriculture and food security, or on one of the many other topics related to urban resilience and adaptation to climate change. Our agenda for today includes 3 presentations, totaling around 30 minutes, followed by a 20-minute question and answer session. So the duration of the webinar will be for about an hour. Please hold your questions until the end of all presentations. Meanwhile, you can type them in as we go along, and we will read them out for you. Or you can raise your hand with the hand icon, and then we will unmute you and give the opportunity to speak after the final presentation. Also, if you have any technical issues, please type them in so that we can help you sort those out. Right, so the topic today is urban agriculture and food security. We will be hearing from 3 speakers. First, a city's perspective from Flavio Diffels from the city of Belo Horizonte, Brazil. Then from René van Venkhuizen, who is a senior program officer with the Rua Foundation, and John Pagdam, the deputy director from START Secretariat in Washington, D.C. Okay, without further ado, please allow me to introduce Flavio Diffels, who's our first speaker today. Flavio is currently the City Government Deputy Secretary for Food and Nutritional Security. He is responsible in Belo Horizonte for school meals, local social institutions, popular restaurants, street fairs, as well as urban agriculture and other issues related to food and nutritional security. Flavio will outline the multi-stakeholder formulation of urban agricultural policy in Belo Horizonte. So now, Flavio, I would like to give you the floor and ask you to start your presentation. Okay, Flavio, if you can make your presentation full screen and then start when you're ready. Great.
Okay. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon for you. Good morning for Brazil. I'd like to welcome everybody. And first of all, I'd like to apologize because I will do my presentation and then I'm going to leave the platform because I have another meeting just in a few minutes. But anyway, some from my crew will be still on the platform to answer your question, anyway, anything that you want, okay? Okay, let's start my presentation. Some slides I'm going to jump because it's more specific, but anyway, if you have any question, don't worry, okay? Can you see my screen? Is it correct, Emily?
Yes, it's fine, Flavio. It's
okay. Just to understand where Belo Horizonte is, Belo Horizonte is almost 100% urbanized. It's the capital from Brazil, almost in the middle of the country. Okay, just to understand, I will have 2.4 million inhabitants. Is our population. Okay. This will have some pictures from Belo Horizonte just to understand. The history of urban agriculture in Belo Horizonte, we start in not to start in 1991, but the secretary that was in charge of that started in 1991, 93. We'll have some programs as the school vegetables, CIVAI that we call Center of Agroecological Agricultural Partnership between municipal and other organizations. And you have a urban agriculture network of PH in 2004, involve civil society. All the programs that you have in Belo Horizonte, we try as well to involve civil society. It's very important for our democracy to involve civil society. This is some history just to understand that all the time we try to do this in Brazil to become a law. Why do you try to do this as a law? Because the next mayor, the next Congress can't change or can't stop some important program that you have. It means it doesn't make sense to you to look for our law, but just to understand why all the programs that you consolidate, we try to become this in a law to avoid the next mayor, the next Congress change this, stop everything and start another one, okay? Challenge for Belo Horizonte, just a second. Just a second. Okay. The challenge is develop and maintain a multi-stakeholder strategic plan. What does it mean? It doesn't make sense to go only for food and nutritional security to go alone in any program, because our program is spread in the whole city. We have to involve people from health, from schools, from civil society. This is the challenge. Every time this is a challenge for city government to involve everybody and look for the same picture and look for the same objective. This is a challenge for us, but we are going very well on this. Anyway, sometimes we have problems, we have discussions, but this is the idea. We should do a multi-stakeholder strategic plan. Alone you can't go anywhere. Actions. One of the most important issues for us is the school and community garden programs. Why? Because we have more than 200 schools in the municipality. And then, of course, it is very spread on the city. We have other community gardens as well. And orchard is not too big, but it's very important because you use to produce fruits. We do this, we make some workshops on planting in alternative space. This is very important for a city that almost 100% urbanized. We have training workshops aimed for food security and nutritional security, okay? Another thing very important. How do we do this? Normally we used to do to involve the civil society, we do normally workshops to involve all the people, all the community is involved on that. Not only civil society, as well the municipality. We should involve them as well. We'll have some actions from federal government, from the state government, and from municipality. The other way to do this integration is involve the state government as well federal government. This is other how can I say, multi-stakeholder that we involved on that, okay? City Farm for the Future program, it started in 2006 with an agreement with RUAF that was very important for us, bring a lot of information and education for us. And again, another multi-stakeholder that will try to push, to pull everybody together. Okay, this is not so easy when you talk about urban agriculture in a 100 urbanized area. Okay? We created in 2008 a reference center for urban and peri-urban agriculture that called CALPIN in Portuguese, with federal and state government in a partnership with us, as well NGO called RED with IPS and WAF, and another NGO organizations in Belo Horizonte. Okay? We start to do a experimental or a pilot project from seed to table from WAF. That was already implemented, I believe, in the same time in Bogotá, Colombia, and Lima, Peru. Okay. We restart the Metropolitan Urban Agriculture Association because sometimes they stop some progress because we have some break in the system, and you try every time to bring it, all the people, all the stakeholders back to the same platform, to the same page. Okay? We try to involve, again, civil society, but harmless. We start with some occupation, illegal occupation, to not only to bring them to this platform, but as well to guarantee to them some food security. The city government have more than 10 programs for food security, but as well, when you have some illegal occupation, sometimes you have difficulty to include these people on the regular program because they are illegal sometimes. And then this is one of the projects that you can involve them to guarantee to them some food security. Okay. We have a lot of agreement with Federal Academy, that we call Federal University of Minas Gerais. That's very important academy that you have in Belo Horizonte. And you expand this program with a partnership with local academy, with some research, some technical support, some contribution on the discussion for political things. Then just some information that from 2006 to 2008, we made a diagnostic assessment and carry out. A multi-stakeholder forum is created. We still have this so far in Belo Horizonte. And an action plan was developed in 2008. And then every time you can see, I believe in 2 years, is it correct? In 2 anos. Each 2 years, we join again, make another workshop, discuss how was the action plan, and how is the next strategic plan for the next 6, 8 years. And we evaluate every time, we try to evaluate this. Just give some information about the first one in 2008. In that time, we have 33 entities working together in that time. The function was the management, from the management group, was coordinate the work groups. And we have monthly meetings with the NGO, with FUAPs in that time, with IPS, with our secretary. We split this in thematic groups, and you have executive secretary, of course. We have 6 strategic objectives defined in 2008, and you have 10 years plan from 2008 to 2018. As I told, you have some monthly meetings as well. In each 2 years, you have a big workshop to discuss with everybody again about how was the plan for the last 2 years, what's the next steps. Sometimes you should change the strategic plan for the next year, but many times you maintain the main actions as well. This is the platform. As I told, in 2011, you have a new workshop involve the whole actors to evaluate the current situation. That we call it cultivating the city that we want. This is the headline for this last year. Let's move this. The network that you have involve international organization as well. WAF was the main one that you have, WAF with IPS, of course. We have federal government, we have state government, municipal government, that we can see all the secretaries that you have involved here in Belo Horizonte. You have parks involved, with zoobotanical involved. You have some foundations from the municipality involved, as well the education secretary, health secretary, social policy secretary, international relations and environment as well. And civil society, normally is based on NGO, okay? Function structure and management, we talked about that before, but we have a management group based on the executive secretary and a specific work group that work in thematic issues. This is some information about where we are. I don't think that important to discuss this. Main results. Internal institutionalization of urban agriculture network. Develop the internal regulations. That's very important. As we are a public service, you should to have the regulation. Normally we publicize this, we put this in a newspaper that everybody can work on that, must know that, but understand that, and make some consideration about that. Intergovernmental meetings to discuss 2011-2012 issues, but the three main one was guarantee access to good water. Okay, good water, I mean water specific for the planting. Growing technical assistance, that you have agreements with, it's not an NGO, it's an enterprise from the state government that make all the technical assistance in the whole state. They are in all the cities that you have in Minas Gerais. They have an office there. And to make available inputs. And guarantee access to urban agriculturists to credits, governmental funds. Enforce local production, trade and improvement. Normally we will go very good on the production, but not so good on the trading. This is I believe that's the main result that we got last year and as well this year, because we made an agreement with state government to the people for urban agriculture could make an invoice and provide some supplies to the regular market. This is very important for them because it doesn't make sense to produce if I can't sell that. This is very important last year. Improve capacity to agriculturists, public managers, and civil about urban agriculture. Enforce and stimulate the agriculturist participation management in Belo Horizonte. This is almost civil society. And spread communication, the urban agriculture actions in Belo Horizonte. This is just a localization to understand where we are, doesn't make sense. Some investment that the total, I can't see the total here, but I believe it was 800,000 reais. That means almost $400,000. Okay. This is the number of results in 2010. I'm going to move to 2012. That we have 121 school gardens, 47 community gardens, 45 pro orchard, 65 planting shops. Normally we do this in the social vulnerable areas, and 77 training workshop in nutritional and food security. I can't see the number of beneficiaries here, but you can see on the screen. The results. Again, it's a new laws that we established last year, in the last 2 years. But again, just to understand that normally you try to become this in a law to avoid any change in the next government. Capacity building. Training programs in urban agriculture, agroecological products, and solidarity economy among farmers, public administration, and community as well university works as well. In the picture on the left, you can see a prison that we start in the end of last year to do this kind of thing. And the other ones you can see school gardens, community gardens as well. Information knowledge. We're mapping the urban agricultural activities carried out in Belo Horizonte and government, as you see a map before. And monitoring the FSST from WAFI, from seed to table, is done by a federal academy here in Belo Horizonte. And based on agreement with state governments, some local urban communities gardens start to invoice, which allows them to apply to city government as a school and others. We have a very complex system of taxes in Brazil that we pay a lot of tax, but as well it's very complex. And then it's mandatory that when you buy something or to sell something, you should have an invoice. It's not easy to get an invoice when you are a physical person and not how can I say, enterprise. Okay, it was a big result last year to get this. Technical aspects and commercialization, demonstration project using vacant municipal areas for capture rainwater for irrigation. Based on agreement with state government, some urban community gardens start to invoice with Produce and distribute spelling and study aids books for these people. It was very important. We made a very, how can I say, a very easy to understand study aids books. Redemption, municipal tax, accessorization, fire, and the others. And a pilot of implementation community gardens in prisons. That was a very good result. Challenges in place. Expand the pilot of implementation community gardens for more prisons. Expand the plenty in alternative space workshop for social vulnerable areas. Food handmade processing workshop in social vulnerable areas. Based on maps, we discover a lot of points that we are calling green points in partnership with other municipality secretaries using no more than 800 square meters that you can use this for urban agriculture. We identified 300 green points of that you can expand our program. An agreement with federal government to expand solidarity economy, technical end-to-end support as well, technical investments. I was very fast, but this is my presentation. I hope you understood what I told to you.
Thank you very much, Flavio, for your presentation. And Flavio actually has to leave now for his next appointment, so move on. And if you have specific questions for Flavio, then I suggest that you type them in, actually, and then we can either email them to Flavio or one of his staff members who is still present can actually answer them on his behalf. Okay, so I'd like to now move on and introduce our second presenter today. This is Renee van Huizen. Renee is currently the Senior Program Officer with RUAF Foundation. You've heard Flavio mention RUAF a couple of times in his presenter. Renee is the editor of the Urban Agriculture magazine and co-author of several books published by RUAF. He has been working with FAO and for the past 12 years with ETC Foundation and the RUAF Foundation as a senior advisor on urban agriculture. Renee will give us an overview of the role of urban agriculture in building resilient cities. And I now give the floor to you, Renee. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Emily. I hope everybody can hear me.
I can hear you loud and
Good
clear.
morning.
Thanks, Renee.
Okay, very well. Thank you. Well, good afternoon from the Netherlands, good morning, or even good night for Asia. I'm happy to be here. My name is indeed René van Veenhuizen from the RUA Foundation, which is an international network of resource centers on the issue of urban agriculture and food security, and we work in over 20 cities, including Belo Horizonte, as Flavio just mentioned. I would like to give you an overview of urban agriculture and its impact on a number of issues. And John will continue on specifically on some of the issues related to the environment. Just to get us on the picture, urban and peri-urban agriculture, where we talk about is not only the production of crops, trees, livestock and fish, as mentioned here, around urban areas, but includes also the input, supply, transport, processing and marketing. And in addition, it's also very often perceived or combined with other functions, with other urban functions like recreation, urban greening, etc. So all included in the urban system. In that we see a variety of urban farming systems. First of all, in the urban spaces used, as you can see here, small confined spaces, rooftops, community gardens, using all kinds of spaces like where I point now under power lines where still agriculture can take place, or large variety in the main line in types of production, whether it is commodities like pigs, fish or chicken, or combined types of production. Very often, as I point here, it's vegetable production. And the variety and level of technologies used, small scale to very high-tech agriculture, as you know. And finally, there's a variety in formal, informal types of organization, types of value addition which is occurring in terms of processing or marketing of the produce. There's the last couple of years there's a renewed interest in this topic for a number of reasons. I will not go into too much detail of all of them, but most of you know urbanization, and specifically also the high amount of poverty in urban areas as compared to, as we can see here, in the enormous growth of slum areas in rapidly growing cities around the world. The attention to food insecurity, specifically also due to the price increases in the last couple of years, but also depleting resources like phosphate, which asks us to look again about how we can reuse our resources. There's a lot of attention to city food and how we can produce within our city food more economically, more environmental friendly. And as you know, there's a lot of institutions. Some of them are represented in this webinar, I should say, who have developed initiatives on urban, peri-urban, or food production, or urban and rural linkages. Now let's see at the urban challenges where the urban agriculture can, or the attention to urban agriculture is a reaction to, and how it can contribute to issues like growing urban poverty, growing food insecurity, the need to develop or to enhance resilience in cities, waste management problems, and the need for green spaces in an ever-growing urban environment. So first, let us look at the linkage of urban agriculture and how it contributes to reducing urban poverty and social exclusion. First of all, urban and peri-urban agriculture is an important primary source or secondary source of income for a large number of urban people, and several studies have shown this. Market-oriented, specifically niche crops produced, there are good net returns to gain. I will show here a table to see if it works. Yes. So some of the data, there are much more data and they are not comparative studies, but city studies show that there's a high increase of monthly net income that can be gained by peri-urban vegetable production, as you see here. A number of studies, amongst others from FAO, have shown that there's a high amount of urban farmers in urban areas. ODI studies have shown, recent ODI study has went more into detail into the mechanisms of poverty reduction and asked for more emphasis on this value chain development where there's a lot of potential, but also that there's still a lot of data lacking on this issue. Urban agriculture, urban food production also stimulates small and medium enterprises in a variety of topics, and can also be used to facilitate community building, as we see in many countries around the world, not in the least in the United States. Just to give you an example, green jobs is an issue where a combination of employment for youth we are working in a number of West African countries to see if they are interested in gaining some income through producing inputs or through marketing of urban produce. Now let's continue on the role of urban and peri-urban agriculture in on food security and nutrition. First, some generic data gathered by different institutions show that about 15 to 20% of the world's food is already produced in urban areas. And a number of cities have included this kind of targets in their city development plans to wish to produce 50 or even more percentage of their food in their city. But this can even be more if you look at, again, a table, particular commodities like eggs, poultry, milk, or vegetables, the perishable crops. The perishable commodities are grown even up to 70, 80 or 90% of what is consumed in that city. And it's important also to note here that for most of the poor urban households, if they can produce a lot of the food themselves, which they do, as it shows here, that it also means a lot of savings. I will come back to this, one of the absent studies, that there's a lot of variety in here. The recent, amongst others, a recent RUAF study has shown that when households produce their own food, whether this is some vegetables or whether they are some basic food crops, they are less vulnerable to this crisis that we have experienced in the last couple of years and changing food prices. And the cost that is incurred with supplying food from a global market can be reduced. A study in Southern Africa by AFSUN was very enlightening also about how many people really produce or get food from the informal sector or from supermarkets, and whether they do that on a daily basis. So there's a huge variety between these figures, and it shows that food security and access to food is much more complicated than sometimes understood in studies. But it shows, like here in Harare, that a lot of poor households rely on self-produced food. Now, the next couple of slides I will continue a bit quickly because John will come back to that. I just want to emphasize that contributing to disaster reduction and adaptation to climate change is also an issue that is increasingly under attention, and research is undertaken by a number of institutions on this. I just want to focus on the productive reuse of urban organic waste that is a potential in and around growing cities around the world. And in addition to that, also the reducing the amount of waste and reducing the pressure on fresh water. The urban wastewater, organic waste contain a large amount of nutrients, and productive reuse of this wastewater and organic waste can enable the year-round production close to consumers, improved access to water and nutrients, reduce the need for artificial fertilizer. I referred already to the phosphate problem, but also contribute to cost recovery. And this is an issue where we are working in the project. Specifically, one of our partners, IMI, International Water Management Institute, is working on this issue, where it's seen if development of services and value creation within this sanitation service chain, but also linkage to reuse of the nutrients that are being developed in developing short cycles around the city in terms of nutrients and water are being investigated. Of course, there are the practices that we see need to be done in a safe manner and with proper practices, because there are health and environmental risks that we have to deal with, whether they are contamination of crops, with pathogens due to irrigation with contaminated water, or diseases transferred through animals in the zoonosis, contamination of crops by all kinds of urban contamination sources, or even contamination of groundwater, are important issues to look at. Not to forget how other people perceive agriculture, whether it's something that they are really experiencing, or whether it's ideas they have of agriculture in the city. Should not be underestimated as important. So there is an important need for regulation instead of, I always say, instead of ignoring or prohibiting regulation and seeking to minimize the risk and develop together with the farmers and the consumer safety guidelines. I will quickly go through this. This is to show that the strength of looking at urban agriculture from different angles is to see how it fits within an urban ecosystem. Urban agriculture and related impacts can be more on the social side, where you look at food security, social inclusion, community building. Other types of agriculture are more market-oriented and have more impact on incomes and employment. And of course, what I just mentioned, not functionality linkages to more ecological aspects can also be found when developing urban and peri-urban agriculture. And the idea discussion with, as Flavio just mentioned, with city governments and city authorities is to seek the best fit to what is already ongoing and what could be potentially ongoing in the city. Now, I think for time's sake I have to be very short here, but just to finalize, some strategies that cities apply and could apply are, first of all, as Flavio showed, the creation of this enabling policy environment, recognizing urban agriculture, working on policies, developing an institutional home. The reduction of these health and environmental risks are tremendously important, for which coordination between different departments, but also including different uses of urban areas and zoning, creating awareness is also tremendously important in that. Another aspect is the access to land and assuring a security of access to the land for a proper time horizon. Also illustrated by Belo Horizonte, and support, of course, to the farmers themselves, not only in their technical, in the production aspects, but also in the organization of their themselves. Just a quick example. Johnny will continue with another couple of cities. I think in Colombo, we've been working with urban agriculture to integrate it as part of slum and lane upgrading, the beautification. It became, together with the municipality of Colombo, part and parcel of housing design and plot regulations. And in that, a number of different kind of technologies were experimented with the inhabitants. I will just, in Lima, Peru, we have been working with the participant design of productive parks by reusing wastewater, as you can see here. And I will stop here because I see that we have to continue to the next speaker. So I will just to show that in a number of cities, like in Almere, there's also a target being set of producing 20% of the daily food basket within the city of Almere, and that's part and parcel of its planning. So with that, I would like to thank you, and we'll see each other again in the discussion.
Thank you very much, Rene. I'd like to just remind everybody to hold their questions until the end, or to type them in now, and please indicate who that question is for when you're doing that. Also, remember that the presentations are going to be online, so if you've missed anything, you can go back, and actually the webinar is also recorded, so in actual fact you can go back and listen to key points if you need to do that. So now I'd like to introduce our final speaker, John Pagdam. Dr. John Pagdam is the Deputy Director at the Global Change System for Analysis, Research and Training, known more commonly as START, which is located in Washington, D.C. John directs capacity building programs that promote and enable research and policy applications of global environmental change, science in Africa and Asia. His current activities include overseeing a 9-city assessment of global environmental change and urban peri-urban agriculture in Africa and South Asia. John is the lead author for the IPCC Fifth Assessment Report, and he will now take us through some environmental aspects of urban and peri-urban agriculture. Thank you very much, John. I give you now the floor.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you very much. And my sincere thanks to ICLEI for hosting this webinar, which allows us to explore this issue and to identify potential items to consider with the forum, the upcoming forum at the ICLEI Resilient Cities Conference. Emily, can you hear me?
Absolutely, John. Please
Can you hear me?
continue.
Okay, good, thanks. Thank you very much. The previous speaker, Renee, touched on issues related to environmental aspects of urban agriculture. In this presentation, I wanted to delve more in depth on this through considering how emerging challenges associated with climate change could potentially affect UPA and the environment on which it depends. And then I'd like to round out the presentation with some thoughts on the way forward in terms of adaptation. I'd like to begin this discussion with a brief overview of climate change. I'm sure that many of the people attending this webinar are familiar with the basic contours of the issue, in that we have strong warming trends that have been observed over the last half century, as seen on the right, and the expectation that these will continue and intensify over the long term, and there will be changes in the timing, distribution, and amount of rainfall, and an increase in extreme events such as droughts, floods, heat waves, and so forth. And there are a number of indirect cascading effects that we don't have time to go into today, but this is just a very thumbnail sketch of climate change. And it is the extreme events that are likely to have a much larger impact on cities and other human systems compared with mean changes in climate. And this is a recent analysis done by the IPCC looking at the frequency and intensity of heat waves. And what they found that when they looked at the return period for a 1 in 20 year heat wave event under future greenhouse gas emissions projections, they found that there would be a substantial decrease in the return time, so that the 1 in 20 year events will become more like 1 in 5 year or possibly 1 in 2 year events. So think about the European heat wave in 2003 or the recent heat wave we had in North America as potentially becoming more the norm. And a similar pattern shows up when considering rainfall, in that the return period for heavy rainfall events is likely to decrease across many regions. And this is consistent with what's been observed in the last IPCC global assessment, that there's been an increase in the fraction of heavy rainfall events that oftentimes trigger flooding. Now I'd like to move from this global perspective of climate change to one that focuses on the implications of climate change for urban and peri-urban agriculture. Let me emphasize from the outset that there's a real dearth, a real absence of studies on climate change and UPA, urban peri-urban agriculture, and that research is really needed, foundational research, to begin to quantify potential impacts. So what I'm presenting here is gleaned from rural studies of agriculture and climate change, and that would be expected to have some degree of similarities with urban agriculture, but probably important differences as well. So when we look at flood and drought risks, to the extent that floods are an important risk to cities and that UPA occurs in flood-prone areas, then one can assume that the land base for urban agriculture, particularly peri-urban agriculture, could be impacted. Temperature and moisture stress on crops and livestock is another important issue. From studies that have been done on cereals and other staple crops and rural livestock systems, we know that warmer temperatures and changes in rainfall will have largely negative impacts on food production, particularly in the tropics and subtropics. What we don't know is how these warmer conditions and changes in rainfall will affect urban agriculture systems. So for example, say small-scale poultry operations or vegetable production or aquaculture. So we need a clear context for urban food production and climate change impact studies. My third bullet concerns post-harvest losses. Food storage losses are likely to become greater because of higher humidity and temperatures under climate change. They're already unacceptably high in many regions of the world. And when you consider UPA primarily produces fresh perishable foods, the potential for storage losses could be greater. And so there's a need to begin thinking about, and people are, about shorter marketing chains and investments in cold storage facilities. These will become critically important. My last point is on pests and diseases of crop and livestock. These are very complex issues, but so I'll just simplify it by saying that we know that warmer temperatures influence the range and activity of pests and pathogens, and the pest losses linked to warmer temperatures have been observed, particularly in the northern hemisphere. In UPA systems, very little work has been done on pests and diseases as they are. So this foundational work is needed upon which we can begin to then look at potential climate change interactions. In some of the cities where we're doing our assessment through focus group discussions with farmers, one of the issues that comes up a lot are that livestock diseases are a critical concern, and that they observe more livestock diseases under wetter conditions. And given the trend towards confined zero grazing urban livestock systems, I think these disease issues really need some attention. I'd like to spend the next few minutes and few slides on looking at the issue of floods and the intersection of flood risks, the land resource base for UPA and climate change. And there are a couple of important dimensions to consider. One is, how is rapid urban encroachment altering the land base for urban agriculture? And then how is this dynamic could potentially interact with climate change? And these are just a few images to help drive the point home about urban expansion and the land base for agriculture. The top images are of Kampala in the 1970s and the last decade, and Ibadan over on the right. Similar kind of growth, and of course we see these across the world, particularly in southern cities. And the bottom images are on the right of Dhaka, some urban encroachment on peri-urban lands in Dhaka, and then the last image on the left is Addis Ababa, where there's a peri-urban area close to a river that's facing urban encroachment pressures. So what's going to happen? Who knows? I mean, in some cases, peri-urban agriculture may simply be pushed further out, such that today's rural areas become tomorrow's peri-urban areas. But in other cities, there are finite limits to this because of absolute physical limits, as well as access to water sources and adequate transportation systems. And so this helps to underscore some of the points that Renee was making about the need for really proactive land policies. So when we look at this issue of climate change risks, there's two important dimensions. One is flood risk to the UPA systems, and the other is the ability of the UPA systems to help protect cities as a flood buffering capacity. The image on the right is of a vegetable producing area in Dar es Salaam where we're working, and that large deposit of sand is from floods. This is an area that farmers have moved to because they've been displaced from more favorable upland locations because of urban development. And so they've moved to this area that's public land. And given the increasing risks of heavy rainfall events and flooding, we need to begin to ask ourselves, how sustainable is this? The notion that UPA is opportunistic and that it can take advantage of abandoned lands, I think needs a closer examination and needs better understanding of these growing risks of flood damage. One of the things that's come out in the studies that we've done is that farmers are finding the rainfall is becoming less predictable, and this plays into the whole risk calculus. When we look at the second issue of UPA land and climate, how can UPA help to reduce flood risk to cities? Well, any permeable surface, whether it be agriculture, wetlands, or forest remnants, help to absorb runoff, and therefore can reduce the extent and severity of flooding compared with built-over surfaces. Sorry, that's sort of basic physics of the system. So again, given the increase in heavy rainfall that triggers flooding, there's a need for good proactive policies. And I'd like to just show a couple of examples from my colleague Renee of some of the efforts that are ongoing in this. One is from Freetown, Sierra Leone, where zoning and allocating of low-lying areas for agriculture can help to manage the landscape in terms of flood risks to the city. And another example from Cape Town of protecting wetlands within the city because wetlands provide important environmental services to the city, and they also provide an opportunity for productive use in terms of urban agriculture. So there are some models that are emerging, and certainly this is something we're seeing in our assessment in Kampala, in Addis Ababa, and Dakar, that there are policies in place for protecting land. One of the issues, though, is that there's insufficient enforcement and incentives to ensure that urban encroachment does not occur anyway. So the governance issue, I think, is critically important. Renee also touched on the issue of water and wastewater and human health. I don't have much time, so I just wanted to flag this one issue of could health risks from biological contamination become worse under warmer conditions? This is an important knowledge gap. There's been a little bit of work done. One study that showed that helminth parasite infections could increase with warming temperatures. So this is something that we need to begin to grapple with. And this is a nice segue into my next slide, which is on knowledge gaps that need to be addressed, because there are many of them. There are significant knowledge gaps as they exist now, but when you begin to consider interactions with climate change, then there's really some difficult issues to grapple with. Again, as I've said, land use change and flood risks are important. And I think under that context, how do we strategically integrate urban agriculture into these rapidly urbanizing landscapes to achieve effective floodwater management? So how do we begin bringing landscape planning dimensions into it? I already touched on heat and moisture stress, pest and disease pressure, wastewater. These are all issues that where significant research and knowledge generation is needed. One thing I haven't touched on is the infrastructure issue of urban food systems and all the things related in transport, processing, facilities, storage and markets. All these infrastructure components could be potentially vulnerable to extreme events, obviously depending on the local context. But some understanding of that, particularly transport systems, I think is critically important. And then, of course, investments in cold storage. So how do we begin to build adaptive capacity for near to medium-term climate change? What we're seeing now and we'll see over the next decade as a sort of pathway into longer-term adaptation. And I think to address this question, we need to consider what are called no-regrets measures, things that need to be done anyway to make UPA more sustainable that could also have the co-benefit of building adaptive capacity for climate change. And again, it's these things I've already gone over, policy recognition and so forth. But I think as Renee pointed out, there's a need to help producers to better manage overall risks. And we can embed climate risk into the overall risk management strategy to help them build and protect their assets through extension systems, access to credit, early warning systems, shorter marketing chains, better transport, and so forth. I believe this is my last slide. I want to flip the equation a bit from how can we help UPA to adapt to how can UPA help cities to adapt. And Renee did a very nice coverage of this issue in terms of how UPA contributes to the urban food basket and the importance, again, of how UPA could help to buffer against disruptions to food access. I would say that perhaps more research is needed to fully understand the UPA's potential and also its limitations as well. The issue of mitigating flood risks is important. The urban heat island effect, that's one where I think there's lots of speculation at this point around that issue. I do think there's potentially good possibility for micro-scale reduction in temperatures through green roofs. Certainly that's a potential area. And then reducing greenhouse gas emissions through having shorter value chains. It's of course important. I thank you very much and hand it back over to Emily. I look forward to our last few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for your presentation. We will now start our question and answer session. So I would like to see if there's anybody with their hands raised to please indicate that. Actually, we had a lot of questions that came up specifically for Flavio, and our audience participants have said that it's fine to email him with those questions. But did anyone have anything else they'd like to raise for John and Renee? Okay, so it doesn't seem like there are any questions. Oh, hang on, yes, we have one. This is fantastic. So there's a question specifically for, sorry, Prit, do you have a question for John? Could you please type the question in? Okay, so your hand's raised. I just give you the floor now, Prit, please ask.
Can you hear me, Emily?
Yes, we can hear you. Please continue.
Thanks a lot. I'm Prit Salian. I'm also from Éclair, but from Freiburg, another secretariat in Europe. I have a question for John. Considering the growing population and rapid urbanization, it is often seen that the space utilized for urban agriculture is diminishing. A, because the value of land increases when there is a demand for land, and so you'd see a lot of encroachment that happens on these lands, specifically made to have housing projects. I've seen this happen in my own hometown. I come from India, a small, medium-sized town, and over the years I've seen we have no urban agriculture left. When I was growing, I could still see a lot of fields. Considering this, what do you think is the best option to secure land in terms of urban agriculture within cities? In India, we of course have had what you called as, there's a clear definition between agricultural land and non-agricultural land. But over the years, the government has kind of eased it off so that on non-agricultural land you could start building houses before it was forbidden. But simple reason being there is a lot of demand for land. And this is a critical, I see this as a critical problem to secure land for urban agriculture. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Okay, thank you very much, Prit, for your question.
Would you like me to answer now, Emily?
Go ahead.
Hello? Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I think it's one that both Renee and I could tackle. It's difficult to say exactly how one would go about doing this. Clearly, you need policies and enforcement, but what you need, I think, is better understanding of the ancillary benefits of urban agriculture in terms of shorter supply chains, access to fresh produce, but then also the environmental services it provides in terms of managing wastewater, managing organic waste, providing floodwater management. So all these things need to go into the mix, and I do think there needs to be greater awareness raising with key decision makers in terms of what are the broad values of urban agriculture beyond just the food. Another response that is being observed is greater intensification, rooftop gardens, vertical livestock operations, those kinds of things. So how do you get space smart technologies in there, and then what kind of support do you need to make that happen would be another potential response.
Okay, thanks, John. I'm also just going to read out a question that we have which raises an interesting point actually. This is from Annika Hagberg from Sweden. This is for Renee or John. What are the implications of using human excreta as fertilizer? In Sweden, it is not allowed due to health risks from medical residues and chemicals that resist through the processing before the fertilizer is ready to be used. Renee, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, that's a very good question, a very tricky one also, because this is indeed the issue of pharmaceuticals in human excreta is a very tricky one and very little research. Actually, I was just in Stockholm and I visited south of Stockholm, an area where they did allow the reuse of human excreta on agricultural lands. So I was surprised because I thought that because it's also forbidden in the Netherlands, that in Sweden the legislation was a little bit more in favor of it. I think there's the issue of there's research ongoing to see how to tackle this and well, first of all, what the impact of this pharmaceuticals are on different crops. Are they really entering into the seed or the roots or the part of the crops that are being used, and how could you take out these contaminants before even using, for instance, urine or for instance compost. In general, and that's not focusing on the pharmaceuticals, but in general, the most important issue is dealing with the human excreta in a proper way, not meaning using equipment that allows you, that does not bring you in contact with the human urine. Secondly, proper treatment in terms of composting, having proper temperatures raised to have the contaminants, and again I'm not talking really about pharmaceuticals, but other contaminants to disappear, to get rid of it. I think those are the issues that are being experimented with, including in Sweden, and that are quite successful.
Okay, thank you for that answer, Renee. I'm going to take a written question, the final one now, from Gary Wilshunk, and then we have a question from the audience from Anna. So first from Gary. John, have you done any work in more prosperous cities? We have a problem getting City Council to recognize the significance of food security issues. How would you, prosperous cities, how would you approach the policy in such cities?
I'm sorry, that was pastoral? Those were cities?
John.
Sorry, I didn't quite get the question.
Prosperous cities? I'm sorry if I'm not explaining it clearly. Gary, would you like to just clarify your point by what you mean by those sorts of cities, and then we'll come back and answer your question? Meanwhile, sorry about that. Meanwhile, I'll move to the next question. I'd like to give the floor to Anna Moralgas, if you're ready. Please ask your question. Anna? Okay. Anna, are you there? Right, then we'll move on to a question from Anthony Soshi from the US EPA. His question is that urban expansion exploits agricultural lands and drives people to it exploits agricultural lands and drives people to cities as a result. The net impact is to lose fertile land, increase population density, and therefore decrease capacity to fill the rapidly growing population. What are the innovations on the horizon to deal with these compounding forces?
I'm afraid I just heard the last 3 or 4 words of that sentence.
Okay, yeah, I can repeat it. Okay, so it's about urban expansion and exploiting agricultural land, driving people to cities, losing fertile land and increasing population density. What are the innovations on the horizon to deal with these compounding forces? John or Renee?
Yeah, I could start, John. You can follow up. I would like to, because it links also to the question that was just
go ahead.
Yeah, okay. It links to the question that was just raised. I wanted to ask to that there is an active approach necessary from city authorities in terms of analyzing and proper planning, including areas where there is not only more value that can be generated by using it for agriculture in terms of products and food, but also different side effects, like John was explaining on climate change adaptation or even mitigation that can be generated. So an active approach of the city governments in acknowledging the roles of agriculture and forestry, for that matter, and seeing how that fits in different locations in the city, and then include that in the zoning and land use planning, and also maybe in dealing with the landowners. It's not always the public authorities that own the land, but private owners can also be included in the planning process, or even being, like in the city of Rosario in Argentina, being supported by tax reductions measures if they allow farmers to use that land for urban agriculture. What you see, just a short add on that in terms of innovations, is in some cities, and that's also in the more cities in the north, that city authorities acknowledge that there's different type of urban agriculture, and that have different locations where they can be most potentially being applied, like backyard gardens or home gardens versus green zones and zoning areas versus high-tech agriculture. And they have different locations and different places and different values. So that's I would like to add on that question.
Thanks, Renee. We're going to have the last question now, which was Anna's question, who I was trying to speak with before. I'll read it out on her behalf. She wants to ask Renee, in urban agriculture, considering the production to distribution and marketing, what is the potential role of supermarkets, if there is any? Some urban food strategies try to promote small businesses, but is there any role for big supermarkets to play? And in the broader framework of food and nutritional security, is any city working directly with these actors? Renee, would you like to answer that, please?
Yeah, normally the idea of what you often hear is that the idea is that big supermarkets are actually driving out the small local producers, and of course this is a current threat, and so the discussion within a local food production and consumption strategy should include the supermarkets, because they're very strong actors in the food market. In that sense, there is a role, and you see that in supermarkets in like cities here in the Netherlands, but also in cities in the south where we have been working with local producers to enter into a dialogue. We have been working with farmer groups in Zimbabwe, in Accra, where we did a market analysis of those farmers and see where they could sell their produce, and very often it were, well, not a very big change, but some of the big change, where they were allowed to have a small stand for their products. In Latin America, Flavio could present a number of examples of Brazil as well. In the Netherlands, there's one supermarket who makes advertisements that it allows local and regional products, that it even stimulates this produce. So there is a role, and the most important way of dealing with that is including these supermarkets and representatives in your food planning. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Renee. Okay, I'm going to have to stop the discussion there. We're a little over time, but I'm sure we'll all agree it got quite interesting, and we got some nice aspects out there, including of the businesses. So this is going to conclude our fourth webinar in the series. I'd also like to say that if you do have further questions, we can of course keep the dialogue going after the webinar. Please just email them to me, or in the closing moments just write them in the space provided. We'd like to thank now Flavio, Renee and John for sharing their experiences and their point of view, and for all of you who attended and engaged with us in this discussion. We've been recording the webinar, and as I mentioned, it will be made available on our website later today together with the presentations, so you can use that as a reference point. Once again, I'd like to remind you about the open call for contributions for next year's conference, and that includes this very topic on urban agriculture and food security, and also about the special forum that will be held within that conference, specifically on resilient urban food systems. So you can see more information about that on our website, and you see the web address there on the slide in front of you. So I would also like to take this opportunity to invite you to our next webinar, which will be on the inclusion of local stakeholders into risk assessment and adaptation planning. This will be held in a couple of weeks' time on Tuesday the 30th of October from 3 till 4 p.m. Central European Time. This webinar will feature David Dodman, who's a senior researcher at the IIED in London, and Andreas Kohler, the chief risk analyst from ALPS Centre for Climate Change Adaptation Technologies in Bruck, Austria. We look forward to welcoming you next time and encourage you to register again. Thank you for your time, and please all of you have a great day.